you kind of touched on something I wanted to go into. So obviously there's four main issues when it comes to buying a home, right? You have the general inflation, the cost of buying a home. You got the cost of you know insurance has been going up, right? You have taxes that are also going up all at the same time, and obviously borrowing costs with the interest rate. So I want to talk about property taxes.
Mhm.
So property taxes is something that I find very interesting because there's a whole, depending on where you're at in the country, there's kind of a revolt about property taxes, and
Mhm.
everybody hates property taxes,
Yeah.
right? So it's always
Everybody
like,
is
don't,
paying for anything. So that's
of
just, yeah.
course,
Yeah.
of course. So but property taxes are interesting because property taxes have gone up a lot. Obviously, New Jersey has high property taxes. I recently went down, visited my sisters in Texas. Both of them one lives in Austin now, and one lives in San Antonio.
Yeah.
And they're coming from Illinois, so they were telling me how the people, like, let's say in Austin, for instance. Austin's had ridiculous growth, like
Yeah.
ridiculous, in the last 4 years,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody from California is moving over there,
And Jersey
and Jersey,
Mhm.
and New York,
and New York.
and
Yeah.
so they were talking about how, the locals who have been there a long time are complaining about how property taxes are so high. And I'm like, well, how high are your property taxes per year? Everything's relative. So they're like, yeah, it can be as much as, 5,000, 6,000 a year. And I'm like, wow, wish I
I
could
wish.
find that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's an interesting thing. So when it comes to property taxes, I want to play something because there's a whole thing about looking at whether property taxes are unconstitutional or
Oh
whether they
boy.
should be revised. So I
Oh
want to
boy.
I want to play something and then talk about, what do you think if there is an option to change property taxes? Because the argument is that, okay, people are saying, okay, I own my home, and obviously, when you buy a home, you have two fixed costs. You have, the cost of buying the home and the interest rate, right? Those are fixed. Insurance is never going to be fixed, and property taxes are not going to be fixed. We'll talk about insurance in a little bit, but I want to just play something on property taxes. And
What percentage of property taxes go to schools? Have you ever wondered how your property taxes contribute to the education system? Let's break it down. In the United States, property taxes play a significant role in funding public schools. First, let's look at the overall picture. Property taxes are a major source of revenue for local governments, and a substantial portion of this revenue goes towards education. According to various studies, approximately 36% of total funding for K-12 education comes from property taxes. To be more specific, in the 2020-21 school year, property taxes contributed about $301 billion, which is around 36% of the total education funding. This funding is crucial as it supports a wide array of educational services, including teacher salaries, school infrastructure, and educational resources. The reliance on property taxes varies by state. For instance, in Connecticut, local property taxes account for roughly 58% of all education funding.
Oh wow.
This can lead to significant disparities between wealthier and less affluent school districts, as wealthier areas can generate more revenue from property taxes, even at lower tax rates.
Right.
Summary: property taxes are a consistent and reliable source of funding for schools, but the exact percentage can vary by state and local policies. However, on a national average, about 36% of K-12 education funding comes from property taxes. This system, while stable, also highlights the need for reforms to address the inequities it can create between different school districts.
when it comes to property taxes, when you're dealing with buyers, is that something that you see a lot of buyers, even think about?
Yeah, yeah, it is because it goes to what their monthly payments are going to be, right? If you're buying a renovated house and mid-transaction they reassess the property taxes, you may not qualify for that same house anymore.
Right.
So it really depends on just how drastic it is. I mean, I've seen some of our markets go from you buy something. Irvington is one of the markets that I think property taxes need to be looked into.
Yeah.
You go from when you're running around looking for a house, the initial property taxes are 6,000. They do a renovation, now they're 15,000. I don't see how there is any way you're telling me that someone has made such a drastic improvement to a property that it would call for tripling property taxes.
Right.
I think property taxes should absolutely go up. But if the property that I'm looking at is across the street from a gas station, let's be real here, right?
Hmm.
If it's in a neighborhood, let's just say that a buyer is willing to spend a huge amount of money on properties. They should not be to purchase a property. They shouldn't be penalized. Um, and I don't think that certain towns, I don't think that they manage this. It's really a windfall if you think about it. I don't think that they're managing the fact that Essex County in particular, you're having a lot of buyers come in here properly. You cannot just triple taxes and think no one is going to pay attention. What am I getting
Yes.
back for it? You know, are you guys actually doing things in the school system where I'm going to get something back for it? Are there
Right.
certain programs for children that I'm now going to be able to enjoy because I've made this investment by purchasing
Yeah.
something in the town? You know, in our towns, right? Predominantly black and brown towns, that to me is vital and that to me is very important. I don't have a problem paying a little bit more for property taxes if I know that what I'm getting back is legit. A buyer, however, they're most of the time buying for the first time and all they're seeing is that big ticket number, and it's very difficult to try and get the type of information that would illuminate what I just said. I'm not allowed to
Hmm.
as an agent tell you that this is a great school district. I'm
Right.
not allowed to give you those nuances. I'm not
Right.
allowed to do that. You have to do that on
Most
your own,
definitely.
right? You have to do
Right.
that due diligence on your own.
Sure.
So that kind of creates, I think, a redirection of where someone may invest. I have a lot of people that, for example, are not investing in one particular town. And part of it is some of what I've advised them to do. Like, hey, listen, your property taxes are going to double if you buy in this town. This is just what this
Yeah.
town has been doing, right?
Right.
So be careful. It's my job because I'm a fiduciary responsibility to the buyer to let them
Right.
know anything that I know, right? And if I see
Right.
something consistently enough, I need to let a buyer know that. And so, in a way, the market does respond to any expense you throw at a buyer.
Yeah.
Property taxes is one of those immovable expenses. In fact, it's one of those expenses that only goes up.
It
So
only goes up.
if
Right.
you're
Yeah.
already at you have an astronomical bill in
Hmm.
Irvington and it's guaranteed to go up, would you want to
Yeah.
invest in Irvington? Probably not. What are you getting out of these towns, right? Are
Yeah.
these towns properly run? A buyer doesn't know that. Until you're living in the town, you really don't
You
know.
don't know. You
You really
don't
don't
know.
know. And
Yeah.
you're relying on anecdotal information from friends, family. They have their preconceived notions of what a particular town used to be like. They
Right.
have very limited understanding. As much as most people like to, really give people in real estate, really give people their opinion. The truth of the matter is, until you live in a town and until you actually start exercising all the things that are um, available to you, you're really not going to know.
You don't have a
So
clue. Yeah. That's so
property
true.
taxes are a tough thing, but to kind of, wrap up your question, yeah, buyers do because it makes a huge difference as to what they qualify for, and as they should.
Well, you know what? I should have rephrased it. They are aware of what the taxes currently are, but you actually, the way what you said is exactly the point. They're not aware a lot of times of the potential for reassessment,
Hmm.
right? Even if it's not a crazy astronomical reassessment, they're not even ready for a small reassessment that
Right.
may push their payment up $300. I've had people where their payment, from reassessment, it went up $300 of their total cost, and that's a lot in these times for some people. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? If they're already really tight, so that's an interesting thing. Now, what I wanted to also talk about was, and I don't know if you've had this conversation with other professionals. This isn't something that buyers and sellers think about.
Okay.
Assessors, county assessors.
Hmm.
So one of the things I've been seeing, and what's causing this little property tax revolt around the country in certain pockets, is that they're starting to find that there's pressure from state, maybe national, but state down to local assessors to keep these property values up in
Hmm.
assessment. So that's an interesting thing I've been seeing, and what it seems to be causing is causing the property taxes to keep being pushed up year over year over year in some places, and I think that I don't know if that's sustainable, but I'm wondering if that's something that, so for instance, if we were to change property taxes in any effective way, I've wondered constantly, like, what will replace that income? Because property taxes are used for particular services in any municipality. So it's not like we could totally get rid of it. If we did, where would the money come from? So I think that's something that,
I think that's a case by case basis. I think it really depends on, no one ever shows up for the budget meetings. I
right,
don't even show up for the budget meetings. I think part of the reason folks don't show up for those meetings is because it tends to be very complicated. It is not, we are just not as engaged in those conversations. Nothing happens in your local town that you don't have a say in, that you can't show up for. If you're not
absolutely,
showing up for these things, all you're doing is basically complaining about it.
right,
And if you're not showing up in masses, if that's not culturally what you tend to do, they
hmm,
basically get to do whatever they want to do. And then you individually have to fight and you individually have to say, hold on, wait a minute. Right.
right,
So I guess to answer your point, I was not aware that there was a push to keep pushing property taxes up. I was always under the assumption is that it's a simple calculation, right? You just have your tax rate and the assessor basically values your home based off of what they have on the tax record, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. And that's that, right? A simple calculation. To me, that's an effective way to remove any idea that there's some funny business going on with the property tax values. And the only thing that you can do as a buyer is say, no, I do not have two bathrooms. I have one. No, my
right,
basement is not finished.
right,
No, I do not have a finished space in the attic. So my taxes in Philadelphia actually went up very recently. Every year they give you an opportunity, a small window. Well, it's not really a small window, but they give you a window to come back and ask the assessor, what comps did you use for my property? Right.
right,
So the engagement has got to be there. The only thing that puts
absolutely,
fear in administrators' hearts is people that are educated on the issues
hmm,
and ready and willing to engage. And we know that
yeah,
most people are not. So they end up doing whatever they want to do. So if we really want to
yeah,
have a conversation about who's to blame, not to say that the taxpayer is to blame, but the taxpayer can affect the outcome of what these taxes look like. But it's